up, everybody? Maran here for another weekly update. So there's lots of exciting news to go over here this week. And the first news story is that we got our first glimpse at the interior of the 2023 Acura Integra this week, thanks to Derpound01 on Instagram, who took some pictures of it parked at the Rolex 24 race this past weekend. And so those images were posted to various forums, and then CarScoop's got some clear high-res versions of these pictures. And so it's important to note first off, this is a prototype interior, so some things may change. But as of right now, it looks to be using lots of Civic parts, obviously, including the touchscreen, air vents, HVAC controls, and even the steering wheel, which just has an Acura badge and an A-Spec badge on the bottom of it. But, I mean, identical to a Civic wheel. You can see, though, that it has unique seats, and you see a bunch of Alcantara there on the inserts and all that. And also, you can see some other nice touches, like some knee padding and a little bit more padding on the dash and stuff like that. But still, the Integra seems to be following the tradition of past Integras of just basically being a slightly nicer Civic, and that's okay as long as they keep the pricing reasonable given those similarities. You know, if it's going to be $5,000 over a Civic, I don't think people are going to buy it. But if it's, you know, a little bit of an upcharge, you know, you get the hatch with the SI powertrain, something like that, and a slightly nicer interior, you know, I think people would probably be willing to pay, you know, a couple $1,000s more extra for that. So we'll have to see. Pricing is going to really be, I think, the make it or break it thing for the new Integra here. So we'll have to see how that all plays out. And also, we'll have to see if this is actually the final interior, if things get improved or changed or what. But so we'll see. But anyway, very interesting to see that. We also potentially got our first look at the next generation Mustang this week. And it's just a silhouette here of this new GT3 race car version of the Mustang that Ford announced this week. And they're planning to race it in the 2024 season. So timing-wise, that lines up perfectly with the next-gen Mustang, because there's been talks that, you know, we'll either see it late this year or sometime next year, and it could either be debuting as a 2023 or a 2024 model year vehicle. And so I don't think they'd be basing this GT3 car on a 10-year-old Mustang at that point. You know, I think that this is going to be on the new one. And so it is going to be heavily modified over a regular Mustang. But, you know, at least with this, we can see, you know, just some hints here. It looks like the front end might be a little bit longer than the current generation. But otherwise, the silhouette looks very, very similar, of course, outside of having that enormous rear wing on the back for the GT3 car here. But there are going to be some other key differences between this and the street car. Because, for example, they confirmed it'll be running a Coyote V8 engine, which does have some race, you know, specific enhancements. But they did say that it's also going to be using a rear-mounted transaxle, which almost certainly won't transfer over to the new gen Mustang. So there's going to be some changes there and differences, but you know, I still think that hopefully, you know, this is going to be based on the new car and, you know, at least have the new styling and stuff. So interesting to see that. I haven't really talked much about the spy shots because I'm not able to show the spy shots of the next generation Mustang. But basically, quick little cliff notes on that is that the car with the smaller wheels, which is presumably an EcoBoost model, that does seem to be, in fact, the next generation Mustang. But all the V8 powered S650 mules that have been spied, supposedly, those look identical to an S550. So I think that they're either testing some S650 components, like the engine stuff possibly, but it's clearly a mule because it had a bullet steering wheel, and the rear bumper was identical to an S550 with the way it had those little arrow strakes there on the sides of it and whatnot. So I don't think all those V8 powered things you're seeing are an actual next-gen Mustang. I think, you know, it's still very much in the cobbled together kind of phase for the most part. Again, aside from that little EcoBoost that was spied a little bit earlier. But anyway, so interesting to see the story developing slowly but surely here on the next generation Mustang. Lotus this week also teased a side silhouette here of their Type 135, which they say will be the spiritual successor to the Elise, even though you can see it has a pointed nose and the back end being a little more pointed makes most people think of the Esprit. And so that's also awesome. I would love to see something that looks like an Esprit again, you know, a modern take on that. And so, well, what it's going to actually end up looking like, we'll have to wait and see, though, because it's going to be a long wait. Supposedly, this car is not arriving until 2026. It'll be the fourth electric Lotus to arrive. They'll first have an SUV, a sedan, then another SUV, and then this sports car will come in 2026. And this will eventually replace the Emira in their lineup, which is brand new right now, and will continue to live on probably towards the end of the 2020s here. but this will kind of be sold alongside for a little bit and then replace it seems. And this one will be the only electric Lotus built in the UK, with the other ones being built in China. And so this is really going to be the one will be true to Lotus as far as being very sporty and very impressive with the performance. And so this week they've made some pretty good progress in the development of this sports car and all their electric vehicles in general here, because they announced a partnership with British Volt, which is a battery company that they'll be collaborating with for new battery cell packaging. And they're saying could be mounted either in the floor, like any other EV these days has, the batteries in the floor, or put behind the driver's seat for a mid-engine type of feel, which is very, very awesome and be so cool to have that. There was someone else that was mentioning, some other company that was talking about putting batteries behind the driver and doing a mid-engine type thing. I think it was actually Porsche with the Mission R potentially. So I'd love to see some of these mid-engine feeling electric vehicles. I think it'd be super cool. Hopefully someone actually puts it into production. But either way, it should be very fast, with them saying there's going to be rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive versions, and based on the electric motors, should be able to do between 469 horsepower and 872 horsepower. Very big range. 872 seems like overkill, honestly. I mean, even for the year 2026, but we'll see. But anyway, just very cool to get that teaser, and I'm excited to see more here whenever they do finally decide to show us a little bit more of that. Aston Martin this week has fully revealed the DBX 707, which will make Mopar fans grin a little bit. And so Aston Martin has announced this is the fastest luxury SUV on the market. The 707 horsepower that it's claiming, though, is metric horsepower, which translates to about a 697 horsepower and 663 pound-feet of torque here in the States. So Hellcat owners still have a little bit of an edge when it comes to the bragging rights there. I guess you could theoretically say, I don't think the Jeep Trackhawk is really a luxury SUV. That's why Aston Martin's able to claim this, but I still think the Jeep Trackhawk might be a tiny bit faster, although this is still very impressive as far as performance. They say that the power here is going to be coming from the Mercedes 4-liter twin-turbo V8, but it has been upgraded with unique turbos and stuff to make it much punchier. But it does actually get the Mercedes 9-speed multi-clutch transmission, and so that allows it to have much faster shifts than the ZF 8-speed, which is already very fast, but this supposedly helps to really improve the acceleration. So this enables a 3.1 seconds 0 to 60, which compared to the ZF 8-speed auto and the DBX, the regular DBX, those do a 4.3 seconds 0 to 60. So you're 1.2 seconds quicker, a very big jump in performance. And it continues on here to a top speed of 193 miles per hour, which is also, I think, segment best. And even the Bentayga speed is a couple miles per hour lower than that. So also, the all-wheel drive system can send 100% of that power to the rear as well if it wants to, thanks to a new electronic limited slip diff that it has. It also gets a stiffer structure, stiffer suspension with various improvements. There's better steering feedback, better braking, thanks to huge 16.5-inch carbon ceramic rotors with 6 piston calipers up front and 15.4-inch rotors in the rear. Amazingly, despite the larger size of those brakes, they're 89 pounds lighter than regular DBX brakes as well, and that's unsprung weight. So, I mean, huge improvements to the handling just from that alone, but going to be a very impressive driver for sure. As you can see, along with that, you get more aggressive looks here with a completely restyled front bumper that has a larger grille. There's also a new rear bumper with a big rear diffuser and a bigger roof spoiler there. The wheels are 22 inches as standard, but 23-inch wheels are available, which is really getting pretty crazy here with the wheel sizes. It's so funny. The rappers of 20 years ago were visionaries putting these enormous wheels on their SUVs, because here we are 20 years later and Aston Martin's got rolling on 22s and 23s. It's kind of funny. So anyway, that's pretty wild. But inside it also gets some tweaks here to the dash to add a few new buttons for various drive functions, along with sportier seats and trim. Standard DBX seats are going to be also available if you want a little bit more comfort. You don't want to have something super hardcore, since again this is still just an SUV. And anyway, these DBX 707s will start arriving in the second half of this year, with prices starting at $235,086, which is about $55,000 more expensive than a regular DBX. You might get a little bit more equipment, for standard versus standard, but still, a huge leap in performance, but also a huge leap in price. But, people buying these things probably won't care too much. And so interesting to see that. And CarBuzz has a new trademark discovery here this week. They discovered that Stellantis has filed a trademark for the Ram Revolution name back in January, actually. And the name is going to be applying to motor vehicles, namely passenger trucks, meaning this isn't a name for some type of promotion. I know it sounds like a sales thing for Black Friday or something, the Ram Revolution, but this is actually sounds like it's going to be a name for an actual vehicle if they do in fact use it. But yeah, and so it's likely for the electric Ram, of course, especially since there's EV in the Revolution name. I'm sure that'll be, bold or capitalized or something like that. And so, a little more creative than, like the Silverado EV, just putting the EV at the end of it. But still would have been cool to see something a little bit more fun, but who knows? Ram Revolution isn't terrible, so we'll see, if they end up using it. But the truck isn't supposed to arrive until 2024, but with the way Chevy's showing off its stuff for 2024 already, I'm fully expecting to see something from this electric Ram here this year. We'll have to see, but yeah, so I mean, I would say that Ram definitely probably wants to steal away a little bit of interest from the Silverado, orders, since, they're not going to be delivering those to retail customers till the end of 2023 anyway. So the Ram might only end up being a few months behind that. So I would assume we'll see something new on the electric Ram here, sometime, maybe even the first half of this year. So interesting to hear that, though. And a few weeks ago, you might remember that I was very flabbergasted by Tesla announcing the assertive mode that they're rolling out here as an update for its autopilot software that allowed it to blow through stop signs. It was allowed to do rolling stops up to almost 6 miles per hour, as well as allowing you to tailgate other cars and hang out in the left lane. And so this week, Tesla has issued a recall for just the rolling stop part of that assertive mode. So they didn't recall the whole mode, so you can still drive like a jerk every other way, just you can't do the rolling stops anymore because there's going to be an over-the-air update coming in the next week or two to disable it. But don't think that Tesla has grown a conscience or anything about autopilot or anything, because the other reason why this is happening is because there were 2 meetings supposedly with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, where basically the feds came knocking and were like, look, you can't program your car to blatantly break the law. And then Tesla was like, okay, we'll update it. And only that part. We'll still allow it to drive like a jerk in every other way that is gray area legal. And so, yes, it's unfortunate that Tesla doesn't really care about safety with their autopilot system, and it's, false advertising and everything else. But at least the government is reining it in and doing their job of, trying to keep everyone else safe on the road, even if the lunatics are computers in the autopilot software. So anyway, not saying I've never done a rolling stop before in my life, but programming a car to do that was just a stupid idea from the very beginning. Don't know why Tesla ever tried it. But I'm glad that has been killed. So interesting and relieving to hear that. Also, Australian website Which Car has done an interview with BMW's chief technical officer that covered all kinds of BMW related things here. And there's 2 different highlights here that were worth mentioning. Of course, they're talking about the electric transition and all that kind of stuff as well. But they did mention in the interview that they do have a fully new next generation engine that'll be debuting here in the new 7 Series. So, they're still kind of having feet in both arenas for a little bit, because they say they still want to wait and see how the infrastructure builds out and all that kind of stuff. But they did say that eventually everything will be replaced by electric. They're just not willing to commit to a timeline as far as how soon that's actually going to happen, even though that's something very trendy these days. I think BMW still wants to be a little bit more flexible with that so that they don't make a false goal and then end up not meeting it, So totally understand that. But anyway, the other interesting stuff about some future products here they were talking about there's a bunch of interesting stuff in the article as well, but basically one of the standout rumors here that was referenced in this article is that the 4 Series and the 8 Series will be consolidated into a new 6 Series, and this is a rumor that I don't think anyone's really heard before, so I think everyone's kind of reading in between the lines that maybe this executive kind of hinted at something like that, even though he's not quoted as saying anything about it. But, I think it makes a lot of sense that, the 4 Series and the 8 Series aren't huge sellers, and with you see how Mercedes and stuff is scaling down its coupes and convertibles and stuff, I think it makes sense for BMW to do the same. They can't be able to justify a ton of coupes and a ton of convertibles in a world where hardly anyone buys them, even luxury car buyers. And so that's an interesting little thing here. But the other exciting little rumor here that was discussed was talking about some type of performance model. So he's actually quoted, he did talk about this, this chief technical officer. He said that the fully electric new class has got what it takes to father a highly emotional addition to our portfolio. So this sounds like, they want to do some type of electric supercar on this electric car platform that they're talking about in this interview, which they say will be designed to basically accommodate any kind of vehicle and really underpin kind of the whole range of BMWs. And so because of that flexibility, it opens up the door to have some type of highly emotional model. I think this is hinting at the M Vision Next concept. There was talks of them wanting to really put that into production. And then there was talks of, it being like an i8 successor, but then they were saying, there's not going to be an i8 successor, and they were shooting that whole idea down. There was multiple times where they're like, no, we're not doing any kind of new, supercar or anything like that. But now, here's another interview with a BMW executive saying it has the potential that they can do something like that. Now, whether they do or not remains to be seen. If it'll actually be justified from a business standpoint, I don't know, but the capabilities there with the platform, and so it'll be very exciting to see, if they can actually bring something like that to market. I'd love to see something that looks half as cool as the Vision M Next hit the streets. That would be awesome. So to see, but very interesting to hear all that in that interview. And some other resurrection news here about models coming back from the dead here. First the 6 Series, and now Mercedes this week has some good news that they're resuming sales of most of their V8 powered models. And so, this is for the US, this news, because just 6 months ago here they announced that the US, they weren't going to be offering any ordering for the 2022 model year for any V8 powered Mercedes models due to what they said were challenges in the supply chain. And Motor Authority first reported this, but my Mercedes dealer source also actually sent me this info earlier this week that said basically the same thing, that it sounds like those challenges weren't too challenging and they were resolved very quickly, because here we are actually opening up for still the 2022 model year. You'll be able to order V8 powered versions of the GLE, GLS, and the G-Wagon. So great that they're bringing those V8s back so quickly. It must have truly just been a chip shortage thing. They just decided to be like, let's just cut off ordering and then kick it back on. So thankfully it wasn't a greater shift within Mercedes, or anything like that, any kind of experiment or anything. So that's good. The only unfortunate thing is we're still waiting to hear about V8 powered E-Class production, because the E63 was left out of this memo. So hopefully, that does come back online as well and available at some point, because the E63 is an amazing car from everything that I've seen. So hopefully that will still be available in America here at some point. But very interesting to hear all that. And some other Mercedes news that I actually got from my dealer source as well that hasn't been reported that I've seen yet elsewhere is that they're discontinuing the A-Class here in the US after the 2022 model year. And so a memo went out to dealers earlier this week confirming the news, and this isn't too much of a surprise considering, last year they discontinued the A35, and, I don't think the A-Class has been selling very well. And, again, scaling down the models, Mercedes is doing this, everyone's doing this to really, trim the fat out of the lineup. And so I believe the A-Class will, of course, continue to be available in other markets where small cars are more well-liked. But here in the States, of course, small Mercedes don't get a lot of love. And so it sounds like, the A-Class will be going away here. So the mechanically similar CLA, though, still will be around. So that is still, still be able to get a small, little sedan from Mercedes if you'd like. But Mercedes notes that the GLA will be the new entry point in the Mercedes lineup now. That'll be the lowest price model. But the GLA, the GLB, and the CLA have all been confirmed for production for the 2023 model year. So those will stick around. So as of right now, the cut is only the A-Class and nothing more. So, but very interesting to hear that, and thanks to my dealer source there for that info. And the last news story this week is another car that's going away, is the Chevy Spark, which I honestly forgot was still available to buy. But you could still buy a Chevy Spark here in the year 2022. And so it's going to be ending production here early this summer. And the news was confirmed by Chevy to Cars Direct and a few other outlets that inquired about this. And so It's unfortunate, partially because it was actually the cheapest new car available in America by a good margin, and starting at just about $14,500 after destination. And so that was with a manual transmission, manual roll-up windows, which would be fun just to use because I haven't used manual windows in probably 20 years. But it had those, and you also get a 98 horsepower engine in that little car. And so, you know, it's just unfortunate because now the cheapest thing that Chevy sells is like $22,000, which is an enormous jump. Obviously, again, not many people bought Sparks, but it just, you know, further drives home this whole point that, you know, new cars are getting more and more expensive and less attainable for the average person. And so it's a little bit of a bummer. But if you still do want a super cheap, affordable car, there are still a couple of options still left. You can get a Mitsubishi Mirage, which now takes the crown as the cheapest new car in America. Those are just under $16,000 at $15,925 to be exact. And so, I mean, that actually gives you less power than the Spark, though. So that's a downgrade. It's like 78 horsepower in the Mirage. But what I would recommend if you are really shopping in that very lowest price bracket is to spend $80 more over the Mirage and go for the new Nissan Versa, which I actually reviewed a couple of years back, about 2 years ago. And it was actually a fun little car to drive around. Yes, it's very slow. And yes, it doesn't have a lot of, you know, frills to it. And it's a CVT and stuff. But I actually was enjoying running around in it. It's a fun little commuter thing. And again, starting at about $16,000 there. So, you know, there are still a couple good cars here, you know, you can buy. And there's also some other stuff, you know, under $20,000 as well. But, yeah, so very interesting, though, to hear about this Spark. And that now leaves Chevy with just the Malibu as its last final car, which is just such a crazy thing to say, you know, this massive giant of a company to only have one real sedan, and that is actually going away in 2025 as well. So only a couple more years of the Malibu, and then, you know, Chevy will no longer sell a normal passenger car. And I know the crossovers and stuff are kind of a stretch because they're just glorified hatchbacks, but still, you know, it's just kind of crazy to be able to say that. So anyway, very interesting to hear all that. But that's it for all the news this week, guys. So let me know your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.